The best thing to do with the best things in life is to give them away. As a kid, you hear a lot of sayings about how giving is much better than receiving. And back then, my belief in those sayings were, well, questionable. But I now realize that when I see and hear the joy of a person that appreciates a gift that I gave, there's no greater feeling. During this time of year, people are graduating, people are getting married, and it feels like there's a birthday party every other week. And when you're thinking about getting a gift for any one of those occasions, consider giving a watch. There are several reasons why I think watches make great gifts. First, and the most selfish reason, there's no better way to make people understand your whole watch obsession than to give them a watch of their own. Like most things that are hard to understand, the best way to explain a watch is to let them experience it for themselves. And trust me, though I love them myself, sharing as an introduction to watches what you think is that interesting Talking Watches episode or watch podcast is going to make you look even crazier than you do now. And if it does end up sparking their curiosity, then you finally have that someone to have that riveting discussion of NATO straps versus bracelets, or at least someone that won't look at you like you're insane when you make an insider's watch joke. Second, I think even people that are not into watches will concede that for many, a watch is a status symbol. Something that says, I'm all grown up, or I finally made it. For that reason, giving a watch is a great way to offer someone a constant reminder that they should be proud of what they've just accomplished, whether it be a graduation, the birth of a child, or a major achievement in your professional career. Yes, that includes nailing that sales quota on pizzas. There are definitely other typical graduation gifts that also do this, but consider that at least most of the time, a watch costs less than a car and will be used much more than a pen. And sure, a watch is far less practical than a smartphone or even a smartwatch, though eventually, that person will have to get another phone or smartwatch, and your gift is no longer. But if he or she likes the watch you give, I can't think of many other gifts that someone could actually use 24/7 without charging, and for decades after receiving it. Many watch brands already understand that, and often provide ample space on a watch for an engraving to mark a special date, or provide something personal, which gets to the best reason why watches are a great gift. They're a great way to say congratulations or thank you in a very personal way. In my own life, the watches that I've received as gifts have meant a lot to me. I've already done a whole video about why my mother-in-law giving me this particular watch was so meaningful. And if I go all the way back, this watch that my wife gave me when we were dating actually started my passion about watches. I'll get to that in another video. There's something just so cool about a watch that has a good story behind why it was given. For example, what do you think about this Timex? Now, let me tell you that Bill Murray gave this as a gift off from his wrist to a maitre d' at a dimly lit restaurant so he could tell him the time. And Bill still calls him every so often to ask him what time it is. Now, what do you think of this Timex? That kind of story is what makes a watch great, no matter what it is. If you're now convinced that a watch is a good gift, you probably have at least two follow-up questions. The first one probably is, how can you afford to give watches to so many people? And the answer is that a good watch doesn't have to cost that much. For example, there are fantastic Seikos, watches from micro brands, military watches, and interesting vintage watches that are very much attainable. And if you already own watches yourself, you can always give them one of your own. You know, that one you never wear anymore, that's just collecting dust, and that you swear you're going to put up on eBay, along with that interesting looking Cheeto you found, whenever you have time to get to it. I promise you, the feeling of gratitude from someone that knows you trusted them enough to take care of a watch that you previously owned will pay itself forward more than any sale. Plus, those eBay fees are brutal. The second question is probably, so what watch should I get as a gift? There are already several great articles out there that provide options for watches that make good gifts across all price points, so I won't go over that here. But the one thing I will say is that with a watch as a gift, it really is the thought that counts. As I said before, I believe that watches are highly personal. So if you don't know the person well enough, I don't recommend giving a watch as a gift. But if you do think you know the person, I recommend you have good reasons for why you chose that specific watch for that specific person, and tell him or her what those reasons are as you're giving it. To give you an idea of what I mean, here are some examples of watches I've given as gifts. I gave this watch to my oldest niece ahead of her graduation. I knew it was going to be the first real watch that she ever owned, and that she was a big fan of all things from Japan, so I chose a Seiko. And I chose this particular Seiko because I've always thought of it as the kind of watch that you want during a zombie apocalypse, and she always reminded me of the type of person that would survive one of those. Weird, I know, but personal. And with the watch, I enclosed a letter telling her just that. I gave this watch to Tony Kornheiser. Yes, that Tony Kornheiser. If you don't know who he is, he was an accomplished sports writer for several newspapers, including the Washington Post, has a national podcast that covers sports and really everything, and is probably most famous now for being one of the two primary talking heads on ESPN's Pardon the Interruption. If you like sports and were born and raised near the Washington, D.C. area like I was, it would have been hard to grow up not reading or listening to Tony, or to those who follow him, Mr. Tony. I've always found his way of talking about sports and all topics to be insightful, and more importantly, entertaining, and with a brand of childish humor that I hope I'm still doing as I get older.
Astronomers found a remote planet that may have liquid, just like Earth.
Big deal. I know for a fact that liquid constantly bubbles out of Uranus.
The Tony Kornheiser Show started as a radio show local to my hometown and has grown into a national podcast. And while it now rightly covers more national topics, Mr. Tony and his friends still manage to keep the show local and personal, especially with inside jokes. And for that reason, listening to his podcast now from the West Coast always reminds me of home. As a thank you for that reminder, as well as for the laughs throughout the years, I ended up giving him this Seiko diver watch. I chose this watch because it reminded me of my favorite story from the show. Remember me talking about that feeling you get when you hear the joy of someone receiving a gift? Imagine how I felt when I heard him read my letter and talk about the watch on his podcast.
Dear Mr. Tony, greetings from Burlingame. Is that how it's pronounced? Burlingame, California. Isn't that in Silicon Valley? I figured what better way to say thanks for all the laughs throughout the years than to give you a watch. It is a 2003 Seiko 7S26 diver watch, a popular watch among... I assume you're not a diver, nor am I, but this watch has a few details about it that I thought would be perfect. And finally, though you can certainly change the strap, I believe that the strap I've already attached, black silicone with an orange underside, along with the faded orange text on the dial, are perfect subtle accents to wear with the perhaps not so subtle bright orange pants you got for free at Brooks Brothers, still my favorite all-time story from the show. I hold this watch up. this is
Beautiful.
the real deal.
Oh, that's
no,
nice
yeah.
looking.
Yeah.
By
that's
the
a
way,
great watch.
feel it. It weighs about
Fortunately,
most of the
correct.
stuff that we get here goes right back out.
Not
this
bad,
is,
I'm
this
thinking.
is cool.
This is not.
This is not going right back out.
La Cheeserie, Mr. Tony. La Cheeserie. And finally, there's this watch I gave to my wife. For years, I've been searching for the perfect watch for her as a thank you for being a great wife, mother, best friend, and someone that has tolerated this passion about watches for years. And although I've given my wife several watches as gifts in the past, I've admittedly never found a watch that both fits her classic style and has the gravitas and history that matches my own best watches. And unfortunately with women's watches, that's not for lack of trying. But fast forward to the birth of our second child, our daughter Stella, where I was trying to stay awake in the hospital by doing random searches about watches, and discovered a rare type of Rolex with the quote-unquote Stella dial. These Stella dials are made from a lacquered, multi-layered enamel and were produced by Rolex for a short period in the 70s in a series of unconventional colors in order to brighten up traditionally conventional models like the men's day date and the ladies' date just. After nearly 6 months of looking for the perfect Stella dial nearly every day, and taking care of Stella too, I finally found a great example of the oxblood red Stella dial. Probably the least bright color of the bunch, but the one I always wanted for my wife. Because to your average Joe, this is a Rolex, which is special in its own right. But for those watch nerds in the know, and for those she chooses to tell the story to, it's even more special and personal. And that's what I love about her. Not the things that everyone knows and loves about her, but the things that only I know about her, and that she's chosen to share with me. Beyond my own Grail watch, I say without exaggeration that this is my favorite watch from her collection or mine. And that's what she deserves. For those watching this video that have already given a watch as a gift, I'd love to know what watches you've given as gifts in the comments below. And if you haven't given a watch before and still don't know what to give, feel free to reach out to me personally and tell me a little bit about the person you want to give a watch to, what the occasion is, and what you want to spend, and I'll see if I can give you some recommendations. Consider that my gift to you.